welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to part 2 of this story. So yeah, thank you for coming back to part 2. It's very appreciated that you're here. So in my last video, which was part 1 of this story, which was the HomeHill hostel tragedy, I introduced you to a 21-year-old young woman called Mia Ayliffe-Chung. She was a 21-year-old British backpacker who, at the time of mid-August in 2016, was living in Shelley's Backpackers in a small rural country town in far north Queensland called HomeHill. So if you haven't seen part 1, I would really recommend that you would do that before watching this video, as you need just some vital backstory and everything like that on this case before we begin, and so you can get to know about the beautiful life of Mia Ayliffe-Chung. So I'm going to kick off where I left off, but before I go, 2 things, and that is I just wanted to give a disclaimer, kind of the same disclaimer that I gave in my last video, and that is that if you're dealing with anything kind of mentally or emotionally at the moment, I would just recommend that you would hold off on watching this video just for later until you feel a little bit better, because the subject that we're going to talk about later on in this video is very heavy, and I would just hate for you to be negatively affected in terms of your mental or emotional health. I just say that you can put it off for now and then come back to it later when you feel a bit better. And number 2, before we begin, is I want to introduce you to a very special man, and his name was Thomas Jackson. So Thomas Jackson was a freelance journalist, and he was originally from Chestershire in England. Affectionately named Tom, he was born on the 7th of November 1985 to parents Sandra and Les, siblings Olivia and Daniel. As a child growing up in Cheshire, Tom was very active and he loved sports. He especially loved playing football/soccer, and he was an absolute die-hard fan of Liverpool. In his education, Tom attended South Cheshire College, where he studied sports and exercise, graduating in 2005. And a long time down the road, in 2014, Tom decided to take an internship with a Cambodian newspaper. In addition to that, he also taught English. He was described as an amazing friend, and I can't describe that enough. All of Tom's relationships, all of Tom's friendships, they were so special and they were so important to him. He really cherished every single friend he had. It was very fun to be around. He loved a good time with great people, and he just loved having new and amazing experiences. So from the age of 20, Tom really had set his sights on traveling, and he wanted to do that as much as he possibly could. And that's pretty much all he did for the 6 years leading up to his 30th birthday. So what Tom would do is he would work during the summer at home back in England, normally in hospitality and doing odd jobs. Then he would save up all of his money, and then he would go traveling during the winter. And as a result of this, he'd pretty much seen a majority of Southeast Asia. And you can be sure that along this journey, he made tons of friends, and he kept in good contact with all of them. So around about the time when Tom turned 30, he really realized that he wanted to go to Australia because he wanted to take advantage of the working holiday visa that was offered over there. However, he knew that he had to do this relatively quickly because 30 is actually the cutoff age that you're allowed to apply for getting this visa. So he kind of realized he had to get his ducks in order and make all the preparations and planning to move over to Australia. So prior to leaving for Australia, Tom had spent 9 months just at home with his family in Cheshire, kind of working, doing odd jobs, and also working for 18 months in addition to doing odd jobs as a freelance journalist, because writing was something he was very passionate about and had a natural flair for. So he obtained the working holiday visa, and shortly thereafter he made the big skip across the pond to go to Australia. And in the beginning, unfortunately, when he first arrived here, he did find it really difficult to find work. So he spent some time in Melbourne and a few other places before eventually the time came where he needed to go and do his mandatory 88 days of farm work to be able to continue on his visa, which was something that he always wanted to do. So Tom kind of wanted to stay in Australia long term, and eventually he wanted to get a sponsorship. So shortly thereafter, when Tom went off to embark on fulfilling the requirements of the visa, which is doing the agricultural work, the farm work, Tom pretty much realized the very concerning situation surrounding doing this type of work, and that was that backpackers in these types of situations are really vulnerable to exploitation. Backpackers, unfortunately, are easy targets when it comes to exploitation because oftentimes they are low on money, so they need work. And especially if you're naive, you're just an absolute target for being manipulated. And unfortunately, it's especially true if you are from a country that is not in the West and if you are female. Oftentimes, backpackers are not even paid for their work. They get their passport taken off of them so they can't leave, and then also they can even work up a debt to the landowners or the hostel owners that they're living with or who they're working for. And the more you live, work, eat, sleep there, the more the debt increases as you go. And in the situations where they take your passport, you oftentimes don't get it back until they allow you to have it back, which could be whenever. And unfortunately, in addition to this, an even more disturbingly dangerous situation is that that sometimes it has been reported that the landowners or the hostel owners, especially if you're female, can proposition you for certain favours as a way of repaying back your debt. Tom had unfortunately found himself in such a situation where his passport had been taken away from him and he had worked up a substantial amount of debt to the hostel he was staying at. So he had even been on the phone to his father expressing his concern over the situation. But at this point in time he had some good mates around him, so he wasn't completely alone. But the main thing was he just wanted to finish up his farm work so that he could get out of there and start living life the way he wanted to. He wanted to leave, go back to a major city, get a decent job, and then get the sponsorship. So about by the time mid-August rolled around, Tom had been doing his farm work now for roughly 3 to 4 months. And he was now staying at Shelley's Backpackers in HomeHill, which was the same backpackers that Mia was staying at as well. So sometime in mid-August, Tom sent a message to his father basically saying that farm work would be over soon and that he was just really excited to be getting out of there and moving on with his life. And yeah, he was just excited to kind of be getting out of there and finally finding his footing in the world and just pulling everything together the way he had intended to. Also staying at the hostel with Tom as well was a really good friend of Tom's called Dan, and Dan also plays a very important part in this story. And it's important to note that Tom's mate Dan was actually staying up on the second floor with Mia as well. So he wasn't in her dorm and he wasn't next door to her dorm, but he was on the same floor, if you will. Meanwhile, Tom was staying on the ground floor below them. So at roughly 10:30 to 11 o'clock at night on the 23rd of August 2016, Dan, who was staying on the same floor as Mia and was very startled at hearing a man's loud yelling voice followed by a woman's screams. Ismail Ayed, the 29 French national who was also staying in the same dorm room as Mia Ayliffe-Chung, had abruptly woken Mia up out of her bed, dragged her out onto the balcony while holding a kitchen knife to her throat. It was in these moments that CCTV captured the horrifying moment where Mr. Ayed was seen singing the French national anthem while yelling Allahu Akbar as he proceeded to attack Miss Ayliffe-Chung with the kitchen knife, going into a stabbing frenzy on her upper body. Quickly, Miss Ayliffe-Chung fell to the ground while she tried to defend herself. While this was happening, the hostel manager saw what was going on and tried to intervene and plead with Ayed to stop. All this did, however, was make Ayed turn from Mia to the hostel manager, where he gravely assaulted him, stabbing him in the leg. So as you can imagine, this whole thing happened very fast. There was lots of screaming, there was lots of yelling, because I believe there was also people out on the balcony witnessing this all happen as well. So everybody else in the hostel was just kind of very startled and very confused as to why there was so much yelling going on. So everybody's kind of started to come out of their rooms a little bit and ask, like, hey, what's going on? It was at this crucial moment that Mia actually was able to get up off the ground and stagger back into the dorm room. She managed to get into the hallway and run to the nearest bathroom, where she collapsed on the floor. Now Dan, Tom's mate, who was on the same floor as Mia and obviously hearing all of this, I'm not sure if he called Tom or if he was able to yell down to him somehow, I'm not sure, but Dan was able to somehow communicate to Tom and be like, you know, hey, someone's been attacked, get up here now, you have to help me, type of thing. It was also at this moment too where someone in the hostel, I'm not sure who, but somebody was able to dial emergency services. While this was happening, Tom managed to race upstairs and find Dan, and they both found Mia in the bathroom. Unfortunately, they saw her injuries and realized that she had been stabbed in the heart. So Tom and Dan immediately started trying to help Mia as much as they could. They were putting compressions on her chest, trying to stop the bleeding, and they realized in this time that they were going to have to move her out of the bath because one, they wanted to keep her safe and keep her away from the attacker, and two, because they wanted to make it easier for emergency services to get to Mia. So the two of them both started to try and move Mia out of the bathroom. As they were about to do this, Tom went to the bathroom door, he unlocked it, but when he opened the door, Ayed was standing in the doorway of the bathroom. Very quickly, Tom tried to shut the door of the bathroom and lock it, but it only made Ayed kick the door in with brute force, smashing it wide open. After he kicked the door open, Ayed proceeded to attack Mr. Jackson, stabbing him over 20 times in the face, chest, and eye socket. In this horrifying moment, Dan managed to get out of the bathroom, where he started to yell for help. After severely assaulting Mr. Jackson, Ayed left the bathroom, where he noticed the hostel owner's dog called Atari. Ayed proceeded to chase after Atari and ended up in the front yard of the hostel, where he caught the canine and proceeded to stab him multiple times. Shortly thereafter, Atari succumbed to his injuries. As police began arriving on the scene, Ayed was screaming Allahu Akbar as the police attempted to subdue him. In this process, he ended up severely injuring several police officers. Unfortunately, by the time paramedics arrived on the scene, even though Mia tried so hard to hold on, she had already passed away from her injuries in the bathroom. Tom was rushed to hospital in critical condition, as was the the hostel's manager. Later, Tom was airlifted to the nearest city, which was a city called Townsville, where he was taken to the Townsville General Hospital for surgery. So news of this attack had pretty much began to really spread like wildfire through Australian news media, but the most important thing to do for Australian authorities was to get Mia and Tom's families notified of what had happened to them. So in the case of Tom's family, I know that after his parents Sandra and Les were notified, Les's father booked a flight to Australia, leaving the next day. And I think out of all of the interviews that I watched of his father, I think the one thing that really stuck with me was the fact that, you know, it's nearly a 24-hour flight from the UK to Australia, and within that time anything could have happened. When Tom's father arrived in Australia, Tom had already been operated on, and it was during this operation where surgeons actually discovered a depression in Tom's brain. Unfortunately, due to all the swelling, they couldn't determine how serious the depression was, so they were just going to have to wait till the swelling calmed down to see the extent of the damage. At this point, there was still a lot of hope for Tom, even though surgeons had concluded that they weren't going to be able to save his eye. There was still hope that he would make a full recovery. Unfortunately, and after a week of Tom being on life support, a scan was performed on Tom's brain once the swelling had subsided, and it was discovered that there was no blood flow getting to Tom's brain. Unfortunately, after a week of Tom being on life support, on the 27th of August, the decision was made to turn off Tom's life support. He passed away shortly thereafter. In the aftermath, after Mr. Jackson passed away, Ayed was charged with 2 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and 1 count of animal cruelty. In 2018, 4 psychologists deemed Mr. Ayed mentally unstable, as he was displaying symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. As a result of this ruling, all of the criminal charges were dropped against Mr. Ayed, as it could not be proven if he actually had the intention to murder or not. Instead, the court directed Ayed to be held for the time being at a mental health facility. As of 2020, it is believed that Ayed is awaiting deportation back to France. As for the families of Tom and Mia that are left behind, Mia's mother Rosie flew out from the UK to retrieve her daughter's body and bring it back home to England. Mia was cremated, and her ashes were given to loved ones to spread all around the world in places where Mia hadn't have been, in honour of her memory. In the years after her daughter's death, Rosie Ayliffe has written a book about her daughter's life and her journey through grief and healing. The book is called Far From Home, and the Amazon link will be listed in the description bar if you wish to purchase, and I highly recommend that you do. It's a really amazing book. Rosie also started the Forgiveness Project, and the Forgiveness Project is a wonderful organisation that aims to help survivors, victims and prosecutors of violent crimes find inspiration to rebuild their lives after trauma. Rosie also additionally campaigned for 5 years around Australia to abolish the visa requirement for agricultural work. Sometime in 2021, all of Rosie's hard work pay off, and the courts ruled to abolish all mandatory visa requirements concerning agricultural work for UK backpackers. Tom's father, Les, also went on after his son's passing to write a book about his son's life and the journey through grief and loss that him and his family went on. The book is called A Life Well Read, and the Amazon link will also be in the description bar if you're interested. For Tom's act of bravery, he received 3 awards from Australia in the UK. One of these awards was also the Queen's Gallantry Medal, which was awarded to his mother by the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William. I think these families are just so brave to have gone through what they've gone through, grieving and loss. It's so hard to get through, I think, especially in a case as sad as this one. I really do just commend both Mia and Tom's parents for how incredibly brave they've been to have done what they have done and achieved what they've achieved. It's just so beautiful to see Mia and Tom's memories honoured in this very special way, and I really commend their families for being so brave during this whole process. In case you were wondering how Dan is, Tom's friend that was also in the hostel at the time of the attack, believe it or not, I actually met him. I actually met him a few years ago, by coincidence actually. I was living in Wellington a few years ago in 2017 to 2018, and he actually worked in the same pub as my housemate, so I actually really briefly got to meet him. And so I know that the attack definitely had a just huge impact on Dan, and that he didn't really recover for a few years, as you wouldn't, totally understandable. I know that in recent years though, he has come to accept everything that happened, and he's come to terms with it extremely well, and he's done just so incredibly well to carry on with his life as best he can despite everything that's happened to him. And he was actually also awarded the Queen's Gallantry Medal by Prince William as well for his bravery. And he's just such a survivor in all of this, you know. This story could have easily have been a three-parter, but thank goodness it wasn't. He's just a survivor, and I honestly wish him all the best with his life, and he's also a hero as well, so I really do wish him all the best in his life. This here now ties in to what I said at the beginning of part 1. I was about to go backpacking at the time when this all happened, and I actually lived in Townsville at the time where this happened. So Townsville's only 100 or so kilometres away from HomeHill, and that's where I was living, and that's where I had lived for the better part of 20 years. And this case and everything that happened had such a detrimental effect on me because I could see myself so much in Mia and Tom. I remember like when the whole thing broke on the news, I remember like my mum saying to me like, Ailey, you can't go, like you can't leave, you can't do this, like look what happened to these poor people, the same thing could happen to you. I still went because, you know, I didn't want the attacker in this situation to win and scare me into not living my life and doing the things that I'd wanted to do, you know, to kind of keep Mia close to my heart because her story has always meant so much to me. I actually kept this picture of Mia on my phone. It was from her Instagram, and it says her name spelt in the sand in Arabic. I kept it on my phone while I went traveling around New Zealand just to honor her memory and to remind myself to not take anything for granted and to live my life to the fullest. I thank you so much for watching this video. It is so appreciated, not only for me but also to the memory of Mia and Tom and to their families as well. Every view contributes to keeping their memory alive and keeping their story going, and that's what we want. So please have a look at Les Jackson and Rosie Ayliffe's books that they've written down in the description bar about their children. Please give them a read. They're amazing stories. I really recommend them 100%, and they're written so beautifully as well. Yeah, thank you again for watching this video. It means so much to me, and stay safe, and as always, take care out there.